And hi, everybody. Thanks for logging in. So, some of you, so I did the same thing with Cornelius Minor last week. Some of you have heard me introduce Dr. Moore already a couple times. So instead of doing that sort of formal introduction, if you don't mind, I'm going to do more of a personal introduction and then
Thank
allow
you.
you to sort of fill in what you want to fill in. Is that okay?
I think it's important that people know that you know me. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Good, and then at the end we'll remind everybody about the books and all of the stuff that I'd be naming if I went through a formal. So so this is Dr. Eddie Moore Jr. and I'm just doing this sort of off the cuff. Uh, Eddie Moore Jr. is one of my favorite people in the world. I just always had a affinity for you, and from the moment we met, and. He sort of came into my life as the founder of the White Privilege Conference, and I got an invite one year to come and speak at the conference. And the thing I remember, I don't know how many of y'all, well, if anybody who really knows me knows that, at heart I'm kind of a socially awkward doofus, very introverted, and I always kind of felt that way around Eddie, but he was always so embracing. And so here are the things I love about Eddie. Eddie knows everybody, and he remembers everybody. When he meets them, and he's always just wondering. His first class is always just, "How are you doing?" His first question is always just about how you're doing, and I love that because it just, it's so easy in this work to just jump straight into work. So that's something that I think is really important. And the other thing I love about Eddie is that he takes care of his people, that he has his popularity has risen and risen and risen, and everybody knows who he is. But he takes care of the people around him, and he pulls other people in and gives other people a stage. And Eddie, there are people who we know in our work who don't do that, that they like having the stage and they're not going to share it. They're not going to share it with anybody. So that's another thing that I love and find really endearing about Eddie. And we had a conversation, I think maybe the first one of these that we did, because I think I actually had talked to your partner one time at the White Privilege Conference, and somehow we got around to talking about how you're actually pretty introverted, even though you come across as pretty extroverted, that you can get pretty socially exhausted, and which is very true of me as well. And I felt, oh man, now I feel even more of a bond with this guy. So. And lastly, I'll just say, out of all my colleagues, I have a lot of amazing colleagues, and the people that I feature in these webinar series are all amazing. But I think the word that best describes Eddie is integrity. I think he's got integrity. He never softens his message, but somehow he has a way of saying what needs to be said in a way that pulls people in instead of chopping them up. And it's just masterful to watch that happen. So that's the Eddie Moore that I know. How was that?
Man, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Yeah, right on spot. Right on spot.
Okay, good. So as usual, feel free, everyone, to use the chat box. If you want to chat, if you have a question, please post it in the Q&A. And I am going to hand it over to Dr. Moore and turn off my camera, and I'll be back when it's time to do some Q&A.
Yeah, Paul, can you give me some screen share access? Oh, yeah. And thank you for that introduction from the heart. I appreciate that one over all those other things that people can Google. So thank you. And yeah, we've had a really interesting journey, and I'm looking forward to, until the day we die, continuing to do the work. And I appreciate your support of me And you're right. This work is not about one person on stage. It's about us together. And I appreciate my mom putting that in me early on. And so I'm looking forward, bro, to continuing to partner. I like to call myself the Kevin Bacon of diversity practitioners,
Oh, yeah,
Hollywood.
6 degrees.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. They say Kevin Bacon is that person. So that's what I'm trying to do, is just be a networker, connector, and also a supporter of people doing the work. And so I'm happy to be here today to talk about another one of my favorite topics that often doesn't get much prime time conversation, and that's the N-word, mainly because of what Paul said. For some people, it can be a really difficult topic to bring up at schools, but I wanted to just share with y'all tonight just some ways to do that, some ways that I do that, and I'm willing to share with you these slides, and you'll be able to get all the information that you see here. But I wanted to just spend a few minutes talking a little bit about if I was teaching and learning about the N-word, here's what I would do, here's how I would do that, as a way to begin to encourage you in your schools, or you as a teacher in your classroom, to be able to hopefully have more skills, more knowledge as it relates to a very difficult word that I argue still has, I mean, almost like a 1920, if not definitely a 1960 impact in 2020. And so what I've been trying to do with this workshop is just try to create some space, just some skills for educators, for practitioners, for parents, for community members to just engage around what I still think is a very difficult word and a very difficult topic that still has a major impact on people today. So that's what we're going to try to do here in this 15, 20-minute time. So I'm really trying to not look at who says nigger. I'm not trying to look at who gets to say it, who owns it, all that kind of stuff. What I'm trying to understand is how this word is embedded sometimes into our thinking. That's the first point I want you to understand. Try to get people away from who says it, why they say it. Not to say that we can't talk about that, but let's start looking at how this word gets embedded into our society so early, for so long, and still has a psychological impact on the way we behave, the way we act, the way we treat each other. I would argue the way we teach, the way we discipline, the way we engage students. That's what I'm looking at. And so this first opening exercise is really looking at what is in your mind. If I say to you, a nigger just walked through the door, what are the words, what are the things that come to mind? Now, in all my workshops, in all the years, these have been the most consistent words that have come up. Basically, what comes up for people is black dude, black man, black male. And my real question for all the participants is not whether you say nigger, it's whether or not the picture of me is in your mind when you hear nigger, right? It's that is the starting point, is nigger in the psychology, in the membrane, okay? So we can get to some of the other stuff, the music, the movies, entertainment, why people say it, why they don't say it, the past, all the stuff we can talk about. But I just want to emphasize the most important thing here is really challenging students, challenging colleagues, challenging your kids, your friends, your community, to really erase this visual of black man, that when they hear the N-word, it is synonymous with black man. And that's the most important work, I think, of over the next 25 years when it comes to this word, okay? And you can start by asking people where it comes from. Has it been something your parents or your family has been carrying with it, or within their thinking over time? Why is it still so present in our society over all of this time? Okay, and also think about behavior impact. That's where I use George Zimmerman as an example. That here's a person that had this word embedded into their psychology, and that word later on ended up, I argue, impacting the way he engaged Trayvon Martin. That makes sense, okay? Think about not who says it, because when you heard people interview about this Zimmerman character in his neighborhood, when they were asking people, what do you remember about him? They were saying, oh, he's not a racist. Oh, he's a nice guy. Like, they were saying actually positive things about him, right? So this is a person that some people would argue didn't even really use his word a lot. And I hear that a lot in my presentations, right? Oh, I've never even said this word in my entire lifetime. I'm disgusted by it. But when I ask people, a nigger just walked through the door, what's still in their mind is black male. So you could spend a lifetime never saying the N-word, but you can somehow in your adult life still have black man and the N-word be synonymous. That's where the work is. Why? Because that psychological impact, that picture, that visual can impact the way you do your job, the way you make decisions. And in education, especially when it comes to black male, I would argue that that's one of the number one things shaping the way people discipline, the way people teach, the way they grade, the way they coach, the way they advise, particularly black kids and especially black males. Okay? That's where the work lies. And so this exercise is really, this workshop is really designed to ask one question. Even though you don't talk like the Klan, right? You don't say the word often. Is it possible you're still thinking like the Klan? And what does that behavior look like? How would the Klan treat a black kid in the classroom, a black male? How would they grade that student? How would they discipline that student? Where would they be if they went to a Klan high school? Where would they be on the graduation list? It seems to me, even though we have a lot of people who say they don't say that word, when it comes to black males, it seems to me a lot of them still treat them as if that word is in their membrane. That's the work. And so what I'm trying to do as we get out of that conversation is look at the history of the word. And I'll send you all these. These are going to go fast from here on out because I want to get through in the next 10 minutes so we can get to some questions and answers, okay? After we transition away from that difficult activity of this membrane, this picture in your head, then we start to understand some of the history, where the word comes from, where its etymology, where it was first beginning to be heard by different groups and who it was referring to, because that history is really important. But also as a part of that history, we got to look at America, because America is unique in the way that it has adopted and used and put this word into everyday communications, everyday society, specifically as it referred to Black people, okay? That's what made America really unique. And this is all coming out of Randall Kennedy's book, Nigger, A Strange and Troublesome Word, where he really documents the American usage, the American impact, the American adaptation or adoption of that word and referring to Black people specifically. I would argue that that's, because I saw some of my Canadian family on the broadcast here this evening, I would argue that this has got even some global impact, okay? That those statistics, those graduation rates, those discipline disparities are not only happening here in the US, but across the globe, okay? So then we start to get a little bit into pop culture, mainly because I don't think the word is going anywhere. The reason why we got to keep digging in about this psychological piece, this psychology of the N-word, is because the word is not going anywhere. It's actually, I would argue, being used more and more, having more popularity in 2020 than it did in even 1920 or 1960, or as Paul and I were talking, in the 1980s. And so because of that ever presence of the word, we have got to be continuing to have these conversations. And some of you know this as well, not only in the general population of pop culture, but in some of our schools, we're using books that have the word in it. And my frustration is not that we're allowing kids to read books with this word in there, but the incompetence of educators, of teachers, of administrators, when it comes to dealing with this word, I think is really making it more and more difficult. And I would say to a school or to a teacher, don't teach the word if you haven't had any training or skills or competence, right? But this word is going to be there in the future. And so we got to keep having these conversations. I think bringing these kinds of presentations, professional development, personal development to our school to talk about the psychology, but also the emotion, the feeling. I mean, I'm willing to gander that some people, even through the screen, hearing me say the word as part of this presentation is bringing up some emotion. This word is not only psychological, it's emotional. It impacts people in really different ways. And so the next part of what we're doing is looking at how that word makes you feel when you hear it. Has that feeling changed over the years? Is it different for white people than it is for BIPOC folks? Are we really blaming this on rap music or pop culture? And what about those kids? What about those kids of color, specifically Black kids, saying, I'm using this word as a term of endearment? Where's that come from? Is that useful? I mean, what are we really willing to do when it comes to the nigger word? Are we going to erase it? Or are we going to just count on it fizzling out? What's the next step over the next 25 years? This is something I think educators, I think teachers need to be talking about, need to be discussing in our school buildings, in our classrooms, in our communities, because this word is continuing to be ever present. And I like to ask people even about their opinion when it comes to the future of the word. I say it's going to be here forever, but I do ask in the presentation people to discuss the future of the N-word. So those are two of the powerful pieces, the anchoring pieces of the presentation: psychological in your membrane, emotional. And then we get to some evidence of pop culture. What you're looking at here, and I'm not going to get through all of these slides, but this is just evidence of just how ever present this word is in our society. The many different places that we continue to see it show up. I mean, we saw people referring to the President of the United States using the N-word, right? We see it in high schools, incidents all the time, too many times, in reference to the N-word coming up. We see it in the college arena many times, too many times, when it comes to MLK Day, or next month we'll have Halloween and probably at least a few more incidents coming up. We see it in pop culture and incidences in reference to the N-word, and sports. I mean, we're seeing this right now. I just saw a story today about a XM Sirius radio host being fired from his job for referring to the athletes as people who couldn't read. They should just, stick to sports because they can't read anyway, which is, I argue, code word. code language for the N-word. Okay? Again, I mentioned dress up and Halloween and what we're going to be seeing and what we got to be preparing for next month. And of course, one of the recent stories today with the, I don't know, do I say white woman, black woman? White woman, I'm gonna say white woman, right? If you haven't heard this story of the white professor who for years said she was black. Now we find out. Anyway, I mean, just this, what it means to act black or pretend you're black. What's the reason? What's the perks? And what about white people who like black people or hang out with black people and so they get referred to as wigger? These are some other ways we see this conversation in need. And we see sometimes people who may identify themselves in different ways, but when they encounter other parts of society, like Tiger Woods did, people refer to him as black, although he identifies as multiracial. Okay, so there's sometimes the assignment of black, or some people say, oh, you're not like those other. So just talking about how the N-word has that kind of impact. And what about, for those of you who have students of color, particularly in predominantly white or historically white institutions, that sometimes these kids have to act completely different than the places and spaces where they grew up. And so code switching and the N-word and its impact on young kids, particularly young black males, and their struggle with being black and being confident, yet sometimes being perceived dangerous, so they have to take on a new kind of identity so that it's more palatable. And I'm advising all black boys, nah, like Paul said, unapologetic black, okay? We need healthy, strong. We shouldn't have to be making these palatable adjustments for white people fears and tears and concerns. So this is another conversation that we gotta have that we're seeing out there. How about this friendship and the N-word between white kids and kids of color, or white friends or white colleagues and colleagues of color, BIPOC colleagues, right? This whole N-word pass and the relationship between white friends and black, I mean, just another way we see the word just show up. And how about comedy? I mean, this is an old, early tweet from Sarah Silverman in reference to, minstrel camps, referring to minstrel shows. She's a comedian. The question is this funny, right? Comedy is another place we see that. Dave Chappelle, I think, made this very popular with his famous skit, The N-word. Again, more and more and more and more and more and more examples of how this word just keeps showing up, and the necessity of us having better skills, more skills in our classrooms. But as some of y'all know, even in our homes, in our community spaces, this word is going nowhere. We have got to be better prepared. I mean, it is showing up all over the place. And what I'm more concerned with, though, is how this word impacts people's job, the way they do their job, the way they teach, the way they develop curriculum, the way they discipline, the way they coach, the way they police, the way they lead, the way they bank. I mean, all the everyday things. Some of this, movies, TV, some of this may be superficial. I get it. But we see this word, I argue, in people's psychology and impacting the way those people interact with Black folks, specifically Black males in particular. So for some folks, it's just a rap song, possibly, maybe a good lesson in your curriculum. But for other folks, this word could cost us our lives. Have us in a coffee shop trying to get coffee, getting the po-po called on us. Or living in a community where people are making decisions about our water, and they decide because of their thought, I argue, on how they see us, they decide to send the poison to the Black kids. For some people, it's music. It's a good rap song, maybe a movie, maybe a little dress up. But for other people, this word in the minds of folks can cost them their lives. And that's what we're seeing. And that's why we got to continue to have these conversations. I'm not saying we put this word out there, but we have got to be more responsible, more knowledgeable, more competent. I'm not saying we're going to get rid of it, but we can be better prepared, especially if we're going to allow it in the classroom. And if you are teaching or in a school where they're teaching, or you're allowing music or theatrical performances, we got to have some skills. We got to have some knowledge. One thing I'm teaching young people as they're grappling with this, because I get a lot of kids of color especially grappling with, do I use it? How do I use it? It's been used towards me, really building some self-love, teaching them about self-love, self-care. We develop a video to try to help folks to get better at understanding that. I wrote a chapter, we sent that to you in the chapter. It outlines this presentation actually in more detail, but also we did one on sports and how those kinds of stereotypes and archetypes can have an impact. In the video, in the last few slides, you see some spoken word pieces that have been put here to be able to just keep the conversation going, to give you some ways that you can continue to have some conversations with your students, with your colleagues, with your family. And so that's just a quick overview, a quick look. And I'm arguing that now more than ever, we have got to be having these kinds of conversations in our school building, in our classrooms. And some places I've been encouraging, maybe you should come up with a policy that bans the N-word from curriculum, from music. I'm having people have many different conversations about that. And so what I want to do now is stop here and see what's on y'all's mind when it comes to the N-word. What should we do as we look ahead? Is it time to get books out of the classroom? Are you prepared? Do you have the skills? White people, white kids, should they even be using this word? In fact, I argue white people often get off easy when it comes to the N-word. In many cases, they say, oh, I don't like it. I've never used it. And many times we believe them. But if you ask me, in the educational system, when it comes to Black boys, somebody's lying. Okay? It's not enough to just say, I'm sickened by the word. What I'm wondering about is that word still embedded in your membrane. So when you hear N-word, you essentially see Black male. And that psychological connection is having an impact on how you do your job, how you parent, how you coach, how you teach. So I'm going to stop sharing and come to my good brother and turn to y'all and see what questions, what reactions, what thoughts, what's on your mind.
Well, that was
I think I stayed within my time. There you go. Back to you, my brother.
Well, I'm just going to keep bouncing it back to you. But that was really powerful. I like that idea of that word, not just being the word, but really being an ideology almost. So the ideology that's behind that word, people might not be literally saying the word, but they still might be behaving through the ideology, the ideology of the word that gave birth to the word. So I want to ask you, probably the question I guess a question that I'm often asked is, probably the piece of curriculum I'm asked about the most when it comes to this is Huck Finn. I think there's a lot of different directions to go through talking about Huck Finn, and I can't remember how many dozens or hundreds of times the N-word appears in Huck Finn. And you have people teaching that who are not prepared to engage kids in a conversation, or some who just kind of, I have this case study I wrote about a class I was observing where a teacher did a read aloud of Huck Finn. So you had Black kids in the class hearing white kids say that word over and over and over, doing that kind of a read aloud. I mean, there's a lot of other conversations we can have about Huck Finn, that are interesting conversations about, there are novels that have, have race stuff in them that are way more contemporary, for one thing. But if you were working with a group of teachers who were white teachers, or any teachers, I guess, really, who were teaching that novel, or say they're required by their district to teach that novel, what kind of preparation do those teachers need themselves to teach that, or To Kill a Mockingbird, or any of these? And also, what kind of groundwork do they need to build with students, if they're going to teach literature by white authors that have that word, that have the N-word prominent, or not even prominent, but have the N-word?
Yeah. Well, you ask a lot in those two questions there. Preparation, number one, though, I think is could be loosely defined, but something. I mean, I don't know if I have the workshop that gets you to full competence. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there should be something like what I do.
Yeah.
That the teachers, the administrators even, and I would argue possibly parents and kids participate in, if they're going to allow text in their school building with this word in there. That there has to be a comprehensive preparation strategy. That it's not just what we often see, a stance when white kids call Black kids that. There's the hammer, there's the chopping block. Black kids get to call each other that, or they play it in the warm-ups or the gym, right? There's all these other passive kind of, flexible rules in the school, but they come down on the white kids. It's allowed in the curriculum. Black kids can use it, and then they can even dance to it at the school parties. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm saying is there has to be a preparation effort that's comprehensive. And it's not about shaming and blaming. It's just about, really, if this is something we're going to allow, let's set some parameters. Like I say music, I say entertainment, I say any of those kinds of venues, zero tolerance. That if we do it in the curriculum, that we have a justifiable reason of doing it. But I do think Huckleberry Finn is a bit outdated. We can find better friendship books. That if you land on a book that has the word, there should be good justification for having that book. And I think this is one text that is just outdated. And so that's kind of where I'm at in reference to the word and what I'm advising and talking to people about. And I mean, it's almost like hearing a bell in a school nowadays. I mean, you rarely hear that anymore. That's how I feel when I see Huckleberry Finn on the curriculum. It's like, oh my goodness, y'all still reading that? And in some cases, as you mentioned, some people are reading it out loud.
Yeah.
And so I think that there has to be some lines drawn. I'm a zero tolerance guy when it comes to the N-word, just because of its historic trauma. And if there is some leeway allowed, there just has to be some strong justification. And if they can show parents, community members, students why they're using, let's say, the hate you give as an example, then I think I can stand behind that. I can have some flexibility.
So a couple of people have asked questions along the lines of what sense can we make out of students of color who are not Black using using the N-word with one another? And, how do we make sense out of that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the N-word is a global phenomenon. I mean, that's how you make sense. I mean, rap music. I mean, it's almost like you can go anywhere on the planet. I mean, Russia, Indonesia, Taiwan, China,
Hmm.
Mexico, France, and you got some rapper blaring on the radio or on a music device, and this word is there, it's present there, and it's just, I mean, I don't know. It seems like an unstoppable force. So I think that what you're seeing from BIPOC communities outside of Black, I should say, multiracial, Latinx, Native American, Asian Pacific Islanders, I just think you see the impact of the global phenomenon of hip hop. That's what we're seeing. And so my philosophy is teachers, schools, classrooms should be a place where kids who are using that word wherever they are, however they are, have to take a break. Like, it's like school is the place where certain things have to happen that allow you to be better as you move forward. And I think around the N-word, that's been my philosophy for teachers, administrators, school buildings. Let your place and space be the time that kids have to take a break, because we can't control the three amigos and that phenomenon. But I think that's what you're seeing when you see other multiracial students, other students of color, now using the word as if it means friend to them as well.
So somebody's asking that in their school, and I've heard this from other people too, students have started using code words instead of the N-word because they know they're not allowed to say the N-word. So in this person's school, people use the word like Monica or something like that. Is that a phenomenon you've heard of, and how do you make sense of that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I haven't heard it in like a Monica sense, but definitely ratchet or gangsta, or you're so hood, right? Definitely some of that in reference to the substitute. That's why competence is really important. For example, people say, "Oh, Eddie, you speak so well," right? Like it's a code word for you're not like them, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that's why I argue for competence around the word, so that you can detect some of those kind of, subliminal or not so subliminal messages in some of that coded language. The same thing you would do in reference to, gender language, I think language around LGBTQ. I mean, I think they're all, in all those cases, there's sometimes some kind of code words developed so that, I mean, not just kids, but I think even adults can say it, but not really say it. Uh, uh, so, um, um, uh, 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 so, for example, like when I'm on the golf course and you hit the putt soft when it's a long putt, someone's bound to say, "Oh, good job, Sally," right? Like it's code for, what is almost like a reference that men are stronger, women are weaker. By not getting it, they're not reaching the goal of what the putt should have gone, not hitting it strong enough. The code word used is this, and so I'm getting better at interrupting that, and not participating in that. But I just use that as an example of how, I mean, sometimes this is not just the N-word, and the important point though is competence, Paul. That's what I'm trying to encourage people to have some competence and understanding, and by having more knowledge, more experience around some of the comprehensiveness and the different ways in which people are using it, you can be better prepared to interrupt and also support kids who may be enduring some of that But I've seen middle school kids, high school kids using some really creative stuff in reference to substituting the N-word.
Hmm. Okay, let's see what else we have.
Video games, I see that.
There's some various questions here. There's some other couple other people asked about the code word sort of thing. You've done work outside the U.S., right?
I have.
And have you have people asked you to talk about the N-word in those contexts?
Yeah, and we've done a little bit of that with the Black Boy book, and primarily Canada, but yes, a little bit, yes. Hip hop, like I said, Paul, is global. It's global.
Do you? Some of the coolest curriculum I've seen is people actually using hip hop as a teaching tool for all kinds of various things. Have you had any experience? I know before the thing we were talking about hip hop from like when we were younger, but have you seen any of the hip hop pedagogy stuff, and you have any take on using that as maybe a way to teach about this issue or teach about racism more generally?
Yeah, and I think Bettina Love is one of those real advocates for using hip hop, rap as a way to, emphasize skill development, skill sets, and not just Eurocentric design. And I think that there's a way that you can do both: the acknowledgement of genius in creating skills, creating poetry, delivering it on the spot, whether it's prepared or straight off the dome, as they say. And also, though, maintaining Black genius, Black excellence, as I refer to it, because the N-word in my mind was a white supremacist tool, is a white supremacist tool designed for the destruction of Black genius, Black excellence. If you think about it, it's the one thing, the N-word, that the poorest of white people knew they were not. That's how that word was, why that word, I argue, so powerful, so important. And so by creating that, I think it gave some real power to even the poorest of white folks. And so I think that I'm really advocating that Black folks, Black kids especially, don't take poison, something that was designed to kill you, and turn it into Kool-Aid, something that's fun to drink. The two don't go together. And so that's kind of where I stand on that. And whether it's domestic or international, we got some real work to do about this word. But there are some creative ways that poetry, hip hop, positive, because there's some good positive rappers out there, some positive hip hop out there. And I think that's the avenue, that's the lane I'm trying to get in and stay in.
Did you, when you were in school, grade school through 12th grade, did you ever have teachers who taught, have conversations about racism or teach about racism or teach anti-racism? And if you did, can you think of anything particularly powerful from any of those?
No, I think I come from a real bootstrap culture, in the South, in the environment I remember growing up. I think my teachers, they would have argued that they were colorblind. They treated all their students the same. And that may have been, a part of the time we lived in, because some of these diversity terms didn't even exist when I was in high school, in the 80s, so to speak. But I didn't feel like I got a real comprehensive teaching around that. And I don't think I was in that mindset either, just because I was so sports oriented. And so luckily I don't remember any, outright kind of racist teachers at a high level, although, there were some of those folks in the building. But I feel by and large, even that kind of colorblind philosophy, I don't want to say protected me wholeheartedly, but I think to some extent I didn't have to experience some of what could have been worse if they had some of the most egregious kinds of thinking around Black kids, Black males especially.
Hmm. So there's this interesting question here that's kind of a little tangential to what we're talking about, but I think it's an interesting question, a really powerful question. So this comes from Melissa, who says, I often think of white liberals as a New Yorker and how many well-intended white people fall back on their political views and geographical location and do not confront the psychological normalcy, that stuff you were talking about being in the membrane, right? Around the N-word and anti-Black racism. I think that's what she's referring to there. I think of Amy Cooper, for example. So what do you say to white liberals who might sort of hide behind, well, I live in New York and I vote for Democrats, and so I don't really have to reflect on this, the membrane piece of it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Melissa, because that's some of the toughest work I have to do, and where I sometimes get a little emotional in my workshop, because I think, as I mentioned earlier, white people get off easily when it comes to the N-word. That many of them grew up, which the research shows, in pretty segregated times and segregated environments. And the research also points to white folks being the greatest consumers, numbers-wise, of hip-hop, some of the music where the word is most present. Yet they still say they don't say it, they don't articulate it in public. And that may be true, but the research shows, when you look at it, especially the role of white liberals in the disparities in the treatment of Black kids, Black boys, especially in schools, I mean, there's a real mismatch there. And so I'm really pushing for proof, for evidence, that even though you didn't say the N-word, white liberal, over your lifetime, how can you prove it's not in your psychological state? What's your evidence of your classroom practices, your curriculum, your results of the Black kids, Black boys that have come through your classroom? That we raise the bar, the expectations, and what it is we're asking white teachers, white liberals, that we stop believing them and taking them on their word. Based on the time we're in right now, and I don't care if you're in Canada or the United States of America, if you say to me, you're progressive, you're liberal, you're all accepting, you're voting for whoever, Harris, Biden, to me, that's not enough, right? Because people have been doing that for years and years, and yet the disparities are wider. Wider, I don't know which word to use, right? Right? You look at discipline. I mean, Paul, all the things we look at in schools, and the people who supposedly are leading the schools and in greatest numbers in the schools are white liberals. And so something's not matching up there. And Melissa, I mean, what I'm saying to you, what I'm saying to others who are listening, that we need to change, we need to shift the expectations of what it means to be a white liberal, because the current definition right now is not enough. And if we continue on this path, what we've seen as results over the last 25 years, Paul, I wonder how many Black boys we'll even see in school. How many Black boys, how many Black students will we even see in talented and gifted programs? If we let the current numbers continue, where will Black kids be in the school arena? And what will they have to be in order to be successful? Right now, I feel like more white liberals are destroying Black genius, Black excellence, as opposed to elevating and bringing to fruition Black genius, Black excellence. And that we revisit what it means. We redefine what it means to be a white liberal. We change the expectations, because over the last 25 years, the results, I just feel we should be sickened by. And how can we do better? What should we do better? And so that's where I'm at when I think about the title of these workshops, the people who are engaging. I'm hoping they're willing to receive a different kind of expectation in order to be considered a white liberal. Because whatever we've been doing the last 25 years, I don't want to see the next 25 years end in the same kind of disparities, the same kind of statistical results. And so I'm hoping you'll join me in raising the expectation, redefining white liberal.
Yeah, you know, one thing that I've noticed in a lot of places that I've worked is that often the part of a state that is kind of the most packed with liberal white people is often the part of the state that has the worst outcome gaps. That's true here in North Carolina, where I live, in Asheville, North Carolina. I was actually meeting with a group of educators last night who are on this right now, and we were talking about that. It's true historically, at least, it's been true in Minnesota, Madison, Wisconsin, all of these places that are just full of white people who see themselves as liberal, often have the biggest educational outcome disparities in the state. So, maybe liberal isn't enough,
Yeah, or I that's what I would ask you as a white liberal. I mean, what does that even mean? Right? What are the expectations? What are the qualifications for the title? Because right now it seems to me all you got to do is say it, and people will believe you.
Yeah. Well, you just have to attend the candlelight peace vigil and join a book group. I think those are the two qualifications. And, and it's a big problem. And I think, it's a problem in a lot of different institutions, right? And education is one of the worst, because I will say, of course, I want to celebrate diversity. Of course, I want to learn about different cultures. But now you're starting to talk about redistributing access and opportunity. And I want my kid to have the advantage. So, I want anti-racism everywhere other than my own family, kind of thing that happens.
Well, Paul, that's one thing I'm hoping we can get out of COVID-19, that we've literally had to stop, pause, reset, reboot. So let's reemerge in a different way, with different expectations, different goals, different mission vision. That when we say ally, or we say white liberal, or we say social justice, I feel like white supremacists are rebooting, re-strategizing, recommitting, refocusing. It feels like to me they're putting more effort towards their goals than sometimes we are. That's what I'm feeling right now. And that's why I don't want to be coming down on white people as if, I hate I'm hoping people aren't receiving that in this way, that this is a real challenge to us all, myself included, as whatever kind of ally that I say that I am. I don't want to emerge from quarantine in the same way I got into quarantine. And when it comes to social justice, I want to be different, because I feel like the time we're in right now requires a different kind of commitment. And this is what all those seminars have been about, all those workshops. This is the reason you've come to the White Privilege Conference for 20 years, because of the time we're in now. And I'm hoping that we're going to get to work once we reemerge. We've sprinkle by sprinkle, we're sprinkling out a little bit outside of the quarantine in the way it was a few months ago. But I'm hoping as things begin to open up more and more, we're going to be different. We're going to emerge differently. And that's what this is a call to participants, to white liberals, to all of us who call ourselves allies, social justice, whatever the language is. Will we emerge differently, or will it be back to status quo? The new normal is just the way normal was when we got in there.
Yeah. I mean, part of that also begins with the understanding that this moment that we're in now is not some weird moment. This moment was created by all those 20 years that I was kind of sitting back and going to my dialogue group, but not doing anything more than going to my dialogue group. So where were the people in those 20 years who are in the book groups now or whatever it is, pushing back against racist educational policy, pushing back against mass incarceration, advocating for living wage work, fighting against the war, battling against the war on drugs and all of that. All of that stuff created the moment that we're in, I mean, all of that and a lot more stuff, of course.
Yeah.
Some people are asking, you kind of use the word competence. What people need is competence. And a couple of people want to hear more about what you mean by competence. What does that look like? What are the things by which you might measure that kind of competence?
Yeah. And I think similarly to competence around diversity or bias or racism, that the way you measure that is the classes you've taken, the books you've read, the activities you participated in. So what I mean by competence around the nigger word and its history, its historical impact, its present day music, movies, where it's present, where it's being used and received more, so that when people are bringing it up, when people are bringing up arguments around the word, you have some knowledge that allows you to participate in that conversation, lead that conversation, challenge that conversation. So if a black kid says, hey, when black people use it today, it doesn't mean the same thing. Well, you can say, well, when did black people start using that? All right? It's not that you're trying to change their mind, but at least engaging them in some conversation. So to me, that's what that competence is, and what the training and the growth in that area allows you to do, is to really, similarly to what we want to do around racism, sexism, other kinds of difficult topics, is keep that conversation going, open up that conversation, challenge some people, listen to some people, inform some people. To me, that's what competence is. And that's what's missing around the nigger word, is really some study, some understanding. What I mostly see is people personal feeling, personal emotion, personal experience. Not to say that those things are all bad, but what I want to see and what I am encouraging is more competence, more study, more understanding.
Yeah, like you offered us the etymology, the history of the word, that's probably new to a lot of people and that sort of thing. A couple of people have asked, this isn't, well, I mean, I guess it's tangentially related to teaching, but about sort of repercussions. So one person said, in their school, they're sort of grappling with how to deal with white students using the N-word, through a disciplinary lens. And, they're saying maybe we should use restorative practices for that. Maybe there's something else, is this an educational issue? Is this a discipline issue? Is it a educational issue that becomes a discipline issue if the education doesn't stick? What are your thoughts on that, on white students doing harm to black students using the word and what the implication might be?
Well, I just put my discipline word in there when it comes to the nigger word, and that is eduquences. Okay. I believe when you're 14, 16, I mean, you know this as well as I do, there are some hardcore racists at that age. But by and large, I think most kids are sometimes doing some really stupid stuff around this word. And there should be some room for growth. And that's where I came up with the word eduquence. That it's really not a zero tolerance in the way that you end a kid's career, so to speak. You ruin their future, so to speak. And I just participated in this with a young lady, and I saw her captured on video using the word, Paul, and you could literally see she had no business. She had no idea what she was doing. I mean, if I didn't see it and somebody just told me the story, then I'd be like, I could easily see myself 10 years ago saying she shouldn't go to college next year. She should be expelled for the year, right? I saw that video and I thought, and I said this to her because I was part of her eduquence. You didn't look very comfortable saying that word during this scenario. It was almost like her friends were egging her on, you know? Anyway, my point was, I'm so glad that eduquences was a part of what she had to participate in, learning, growth. I do think that there needs to be some repairing. If you say the word publicly and cause injury, then you should repair publicly and offer your apology in that way as well. So I think that there's some ways you can hold people accountable, but I'm real careful at 14, 13, 12, 16, 18 to end a high school kid's career, if that makes sense. And so that's where I came up with the term eduquence. When it gets to adults, I think you got to really weigh that in a different way, because I think there comes a time when you know Santa Claus is not real, right? Like, come on now. You know you shouldn't be referring to me as nigga today. And so I think there comes a time as an adult when, you know, the consequences can be very different. Although I have different emotions about Amy Cooper, right? Like, I mean, I've been grappling with that, right? She lost her job, but I mean, how much, what else should happen? Should she go to jail? You know, so that's been a really, you know, for me, what I was saying is, what is the eduquence? What is she going to learn from this? How is she going to give back to the community? So I do think eduquences can apply even in the case of adults, because I think the career she had, losing that, that was a really severe blow. Mm-hmm. But what she did, that was huge. So I just want to say to y'all, I battle with this myself. I grapple with this myself on the adult level. But for kids, eduquences. Great question.
So here's a question, sort of getting back to that hip hop theme. So someone is asking for recommendations of hip hop they can use for sparking discussion about Black genius. So they're asking for, like, I think you use the term positive hip hop, and they're looking for. And I'm so old. I got KRS-One and Poor Righteous Teachers. That's how.
Yeah. Well, one name I'll give you is Jasiri X, Jasiri X. He's probably one of the better positive rappers that I've seen, that I communicate, I listen to, I introduce my son to. There are a lot of positive Christian rappers out there as well. There's actually a DJ out of New York by the name of DJ Tony Tone, and he every Sunday plays nothing but positive hip hop music, Christian rap music. So that's another area, if that's an avenue that people can connect through. But I think the other thing I will mention about, you know, really the positive rappers is we have more options than we had when we were listening to NWA back in the day. So I do think that I can't think of off the top of my head the name of this rapper, but he made this song, Black Made That. Black, traditional spelling, Made That. If you Google that, look for that on YouTube. I forget this past principal, past school teacher, then became rapper, but he's got a lot of other positive songs out there. But the Black Made That is one about Black genius, Black excellence, and I recommend that to anyone. Maybe somebody be able to dig it up in these next few minutes and put it in the chat for us, or the question answer for us. That's another one that I would give you if you Google that song or YouTube that song. But there's some other positive options. Email me, please, folks. Reach out to me, and I'll send you some more positive rappers. I'll do some research. But Jasiri X is another good one, and he's got a lot of contacts to a lot of positive rappers as well. More options out there. The other thing, Paul, I want to say quickly to parents, though, and I think teachers can do this as well. is let's engage the kids about the music. Let's stop saying, turn that crap off. And it may warrant being turned off. I'm not saying that it's not. But let's at least ask them, why are you listening to that? What is it about that that's attracted to you? Are there other positive options? Have you considered? Really, competence is about engagement, conversation. And so I remember even myself saying, turn that crap off. And now I try to do a better job of saying, whoa, back that up. What were they saying there? What about that is entertainment to you? Help me understand that. Explain that to me. And really building that dialogue, that conversation. And so I've come a long ways, but that's the one thing I'm engaging and encouraging people to do is engage kids in conversations as opposed to the turn that crap off solution.
And if anybody wants any more recommendations from the 90s, because that's about all I have, I think we should also name at least one some women too. Queen Latifah.
Yes, thank you.
Monie Love.
MC Lyte.
MC Lyte.
Yeah.
Positive messages. My earliest, becoming political was from Run DMC, Public Enemy, Cool G Rap. That was my earliest, that is the stuff that made me political, that made me think, oh man, I better KRS-One. I need to start thinking about, poor righteous teachers. And that was like my first sort of politic was that stuff. So Spearhead, do you know Spearhead, Michael Franti at all? Do you know that?
Yes, that's right. That's another great old school. Well, I guess now he's old school, but yes. Michael Franti is another great recommendation. Yes.
Very social justice oriented. Yeah. Okay, let's see. It's 8:11. Holy moly. I don't know if I should ask another question or just try to get some wrap up comments from you. There's a lot of comments and not questions in the Q&A here that I'm kind of scrolling through.
Mos Def, that's another positive rapper.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Well, what's interesting too is the real expansion of rap music to include more women, gender non-conforming artists out there that, 10 years ago, 20 years ago for sure, wouldn't have been out there. Now, the impact of Cardi B possibly and some of these other rappers, and Beyonce, is she a rapper? I don't know. That's to be debated, but it's just been interesting to watch over the last 5 years, just how the work and the lyrics are all just changing because of the participation of a broader cast of rappers being added. And it's going to be interesting to see the next 25 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess here's a question, and someone's asking how they contact you. So how do people get a hold of you if maybe they want to bring you in to do some work with their school or?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, one thing I'll do right quickly is show people this one last time, which is basically my information slide. If you want to take a picture of that. You can also find me on the internet through my name, EddieMooreJr.com. Social media is another way to follow me. One thing I'll close out with, Paul, I think really is important when working with Black Genius, Black Excellence, particularly as young Black boys, is I never learned alternatives to music. I just learned one brand of rap music in my earliest days. And so, but I never played the guitar, never learned the piano, and just thought sports and, rap was really kind of my forte. And so I've done working on a kid's book now. You see it there, and this is going to be based on some of my life and what I wish I would have learned growing up, just to start giving Black boys though, but I think all kids, just a look into a world of kids, right? Like, this is not going to be any social justice warrior, anybody. I'm not putting any kind of martyr pressure on little E here. I'm just saying, go out there and play baseball, pick up frogs. Sometimes kids, as my artist likes to say, just need to read books about kids walking their dog. So I'm really excited about that. That's the way I'll close, Paul, by doing a shameless plug for my kids' book, which I'm really excited about. But it's one of the ways that I'm trying to advocate for Black genius, Black excellence early in Black kids, Black boys especially, but I think all kids. And so, again, I appreciate you giving me a platform, an opportunity to engage folks around this very difficult topic. And hopefully tonight was able to give folks some information. And if they want to reach out and connect with me for either additional questions or possibility of doing some collaboration, some consulting, here's how you find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Eddie. This has been great as usual. And I will be sending this out sometime tomorrow in case somebody wants to take a second look. We're also trying to figure out a schedule for the next series. So we'll be announcing that pretty soon. And make sure to check out Eddie's books, including the Guide for White Women Who Teach Black Boys. Shoot, I'm blanking on the other ones, even though I wrote the foreword for one of them.
Everyday White People is the other one, as well as the Cookbook for Diversity Consultants. As you should know, Paul, we just submitted our newest book, Teaching Beautiful, Brilliant Black Girls. So that's due to release after the new year. And I was going to ask you one last overtime question. How are your rap skills? Do you have a 2-sentence rap? Did you drop one line or 2 lines as a way to say goodbye? You have a line, a rap line.
Gosh, I wish I did. I'm no Rakim, even though I really wish I was. I don't have that, but all of what I listened to growing up, you would think that I would have a little something.
Something. Come on, PG.
And I used to be a DJ, so I should have something from.
I think you're just being a little introverted, a little shy. I know you got something, but if you don't, I'll drop my rhyme for you. I'll send y'all out with my rhyme. My name is Eddie. I'm really cool. Cool like the water in your swimming pool. Cooler than ice. Cooler than the Pope. Cooler than the coolest drink down your throat. I appreciate y'all. PG, I know you got a rhyme, but you're introverting on me. I'm gonna let you off the hook this time. Next time, I'm gonna demand you drop that rhyme.
Okay. All right. See, this is not very good solidarity with a fellow introvert.
That's right. That's right.